Today on the Tearsheet podcast.
So we're announcing a Plaid Exchange, and what Plaid Exchange is it's an open finance platform that makes it easy for financial institutions of any size, scale, or segment to establish and enable data access and account connectivity on behalf of their customers through an API integration.
I wanted to tell you about Tearsheet's newest online conference, Day-to-Day 2020. Entire financial ecosystems are emerging around financial institutions and large fintech companies, with data at its core. We're spending 3 days hearing from top executives at firms like Fiserv, MX, Wells Fargo, Envestnet Yodlee, Plaid, and more about how they are best leveraging customer data to help deliver better products and services. Day-to-Day 2020 is all about data sharing, data aggregation, and personalization. It's about the future of finance. For more information, click on the Day-to-Day conference button at the top of our website, tearsheet.co.
My name is Niko Karvounis. I am head of product for the institutions group at Plaid. What that means is that I head up our product positioning, development, and strategy with regards to financial institutions. So partnering with them, building data integrations with them, and building products to tighten our relationships and collaboration with them. I got into this role by way of a company I had co-founded called Quovo. So we had raised seed funding for Quovo in 2013. Quovo was an account connectivity and insights platform primarily for investment data and wealth management. So we did a lot of enterprise work in the wealth space. And then we joined Plaid in early 2019. And so I've been with Plaid since then. And I'm out of the New York office where I have sort of a regional leadership role. But in terms of my product focus today, it's really around heading up that institutions group that I mentioned.
Great. And yeah, we first met back in the early Quovo days. So it's been really interesting to watch you navigate the launch of your own startup and then, obviously the merger with Visa. All the way through to today. So I know there's a big product announcement that I want to get to. Do you want to describe that and what it is?
Sure. So we're announcing a Plaid Exchange, and what Plaid Exchange is it's an open finance platform that makes it easy for financial institutions of any size, scale, or segment to establish and enable data access and account connectivity on behalf of their customers through an API integration. So at the core of Plaid Exchange is an API integration with the Plaid Exchange API that establishes secure, reliable data connectivity between the institution and Plaid on behalf of our shared customers and users who want to add those accounts to the apps and services that they use. And so what we did was we looked at that API integration as sort of the core pipes of how we can move connectivity to the next level. But then we also stepped back and we said, building an API and building an open finance solution as a financial institution is difficult. They're not innately technology companies in some cases, and larger institutions and smaller institutions have different sets of resources and different kinds of infrastructure. So what we wanted to do was think about not only the core API integration, but what to build and offer around that in terms of tooling, in terms of monitoring, in terms of consumer access points and privacy and data management controls that actually create a bundle and a solution and a platform around the API integration so that we're essentially offering open finance in a box to institutions large and small so that they can scale up their data and account connectivity practices in order to provide their end customers with the digital experience that they're demanding today. One of the things we talk about is how there was been a multi-year progression toward connectivity being a foundational element of digital finance. But in this new pandemic, this crisis that we're finding ourselves in, where millions of people are locked at home, essentially, or have been for months, digital finance and app usage has skyrocketed. And the progression of people having expectations that they will be able to connect their financial accounts to apps and services that was happening naturally is just happening in a much more extreme, punctuated way now, because you literally can't go to your bank. And so what we're seeing is that, people use this phrase a lot, but I think it's true in this pandemic, the establishment of new normal. Like, what are the behaviors that people are taking on under these conditions that will last? And the idea that the same way that you expect your bank to have a good website you are expecting your bank to allow you to connect your financial account with them to the digital services that you need and want for your livelihood and financial well-being. That is being cemented as a core expectation of a digital customer today and in the future. And so Plaid Exchange is really meant to provide a scalable, secure, innovative, future-proofed solution to make sure financial institutions can provide that going forward.
Got it. And can you explain, I guess, how Exchange is the evolution of Plaid's own products? Like how is this different than what Plaid offered previously?
Sure. So, we interact with financial institutions, with developers and fintech apps, and with end consumers. So, developers of fintech apps are sort of our primary customer base in the sense that we have an API that they integrate with in order to bring account connectivity into their application. So, when you open a window and you select your institution because you want to connect it for payment purposes, or you want to connect it for giving your financial advisor or robo advisor a 360-degree review of your finances, that's all happening on an app that has integrated with our API. And from that example, you can also see that we interact with end consumers as well, because we have the user surfaces where you open the module, look for your institution, and connect your account. And so we've always had those consumer and developer facing value propositions. And we've always worked very closely with financial institutions in order to ensure that on the back end, the connectivity was happening successfully, so that when you selected your institution and connected your account, that data would flow reliably into the app and service that you wanted it to. What Plaid Exchange really is focusing on that institution side even further to ensure that as millions of users and people in North America and eventually globally want to think about connecting their account and doing so at a scale we haven't seen before, that the financial institutions, their infrastructure, their solutioning, and their technology programs can support that. And so we sit at that intersection between institutions, consumers, and developers. And so Plaid Exchange is really coming up with a new API-based solution for Plaid and institutions to be aligned and create mutual value for the entire ecosystem.
I got it. And it's really interesting to watch as Plaid expands. You went from sort of the asset side of the balance sheet to liabilities. You were focused on developers, and now rounding out institutional products. It's really kind of helping to foment an entire ecosystem of data, right, around all these institutions.
Yeah, I mean, we're really serious about accelerating open finance. We believe that there should be secure, reliable data flow on behalf of consumers, regardless of what institution you are, what provider you're using, or what your stack looks like. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to push forward the conversation and the understanding of how this could be designed, so that we're establishing scalable open finance that allows, as we put it, institutions from Wall Street to Main Street to provide the same digital experience for their customers in order to accelerate that innovation.
So what went into building this? Like, where did the ideation occur? How was your team structured to be able to develop this?
Yeah, it's a cross-functional initiative. It takes a lot, as you could expect, but it's something that has a few moving parts. One is the API itself, so thinking about how to build an API connectivity, the Plaid Exchange API for data exchange. The other is thinking about consumer access. So how do we think about giving consumers the tools that they need to not only connect their accounts, but to view and manage the data that they want to manage? So where do you want to view all the connections you have? What do you want? What do you want to disable? What do you want to delete? Giving them that privacy and control over their own data. That's another sort of pillar of this. So you've got the API itself, you've got consumer access, and then you've got sort of platform management, which is the idea of, on the financial institution side, where are the tools that would provide them with the leverage to be active participants in this ecosystem? So for example, how do we optimize traffic patterns between apps and institutions, right? How do we give them, the financial institutions, dashboards to understand the activity and the traffic patterns that are happening, monitor their integrations, and be able to understand how they're being plugged into the Plaid network and ultimately the open finance network that we're hoping we can push forward. And then thinking also about where there could be products and beneficial features, for the financial institutions based on a Plaid Exchange integration. So once you've set up the API as sort of a data out infrastructure for you as an institution, what does that open on your digital roadmap? So for example, people I don't think appreciate that one of the more difficult things for financial institutions to do when they're trying to create client portals or personal finance dashboards for their users is categorizing transaction activity in order to populate that pie chart, right, of how you spent your money or what your budget is. With a Plaid Exchange integration, because we're receiving that transaction data through that channel from the institution, we can actually make that data available back to them fully categorized so that they can plug that into their own systems internally and spin up things like personal finance dashboards much more efficiently than they could otherwise.
Hmm.
So the way we looked at it was it's cross-functional in terms of thinking about talking with financial institutions and bringing this to the industry and making sure that we're working with all the ecosystem players. But then there's also these four pillars of the platform itself, of the Plaid Exchange API, consumer access tools, the platform management tools for the financial institutions, and then some of the features and products that we can offer on top of the data integration.
So can we talk about those consumer access tools? Like, it's kind of like, I know all the data sharing is premised on consumer permissioning. That's a huge deal. I know you guys make, and the rest of the industry makes. Um, how do you think about designing those tools for a consumer that, in a way is not used to permissioning, financial apps in that sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually do a ton of internal research on that very thing. So we actually have folks within Plaid who spend a lot, if not all of their time, discussing that thing directly with consumers and getting a sense of how people value it and what they expect and what is the understanding. And that's just paramount for us. We want to be totally transparent. We want to be upfront with consumers about what's happening. We want to give them the tools that not only have the functionality they need, but are designed in such a way that it's very clear what they're accessing and what they are managing on these portals. So we do it, I think, in a really important way, which is just from the ground up, making sure that everything we do is fully informed by human beings and by their understanding. And it's designed in such a way that when they interact with those surfaces, it's incredibly clear what they are doing, what the implications are, and what are the benefits and capabilities that we're offering to them through that toolkit. And so we really think about it ground up to make sure that the human beings on the other side of those portals, those widgets, and those services are being presented with the experience that is the most resonant, most transparent.
And okay, so switching gears back to the platform side and facing institutions, Plaid's roots are in developer-facing tools. How are you organized internally to help institutions get the most out of this new product?
Well, that's sort of my institution's group.
Hmm.
We sort of think about organizing internally around those different constituencies, right? So having a consumer practice, a developer practice, and an institutions practice. And then, of course, all of those interact. And so we need to make sure that we are coordinated cross-functionally and that all the right folks are working together on these initiatives. So I think it's a testament to how committed we are to an open finance ecosystem that is truly open and beneficial to all players, that we are organized in a way where we want to go very deep into each constituency, but we also have to be able to surface and interact with each other strategically internally where you have overlap points. So for example, where you think about if we are integrating with an institution to implement data connectivity through the Plaid Exchange API, ensuring that we understand how that will flow down to our developer customers when they want to access that data through the Plaid API. So there's a lot of coordination internally, but we have designed our organization to be able to go both deep into each area and also be scalable in a way across functions and across focus areas.
Got it. And how are you getting the word out to institutions? You launched this product. What are you doing in terms of marketing or carrying the message?
Yeah. We have, it's interesting. There's a few different layers to that, but one of them that I think is important to point out is we get about 10 to 20 inbounds from banks a week
Hmm.
where they are looking for an API solution. And they are looking to get serious about connectivity and scaling connectivity for the future. And they're really beginning to think about what is open finance, and how do I think about implementing that on my side of the institution? So there's actually a very real element of this, which is inbound interest and demand from institutions to help this problem be solved for the long term. So there's a very real part of it that is actually engaging with folks who are already coming in the door looking for this. We also, of course, have relationships with a number of institutions. We provide connectivity across a broad range of institutions today, and so we have close relationships there. So we also leverage existing channels. We've talked to, I think, about 100 banks or so in terms of just even building up to Plaid Exchange, how it should be designed, what we're offering, what would be compelling. So we've been leveraging that to inform the design of the platform, and then also keep those conversations going as we launch.
Is there also like a word of mouth component, given the fact that it's sort of a two-sided marketplace structure?
There's a word of mouth component in the sense that this is a bit of a perfect storm in terms of just a moment where people are thinking about this, right?
Mm.
So you're seeing some banks beginning to build their own APIs who in the past had sort of been trepidatious about offering connectivity. We're seeing the inbound interest I mentioned of 10 to 20 banks a week, right? You're seeing the consumers stuck at home really needing account connectivity, and even small businesses, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw, but we designed a solution to help with the PPP program here in the U.S. and we created a solution in about 8 days, I think. And that was enabling small businesses to connect their payroll data in order to apply for loan forgiveness. Now, that was something you could build very quickly with the underlying foundation of connectivity, but it's a good example of how right now there's this urgent and I think honestly long-lasting demand for that connectivity. So if you combine the growing demand with the punctuated demand, with everything else that I mentioned on the institution side, with them understanding that this is actually a requirement for their customers, in that sense, there is a moment where people are thinking about this and beginning to try and collaborate on solutions. And so there is a word of mouth component in that a lot of folks are talking about this.
Got it. And can you give us a little insight, maybe where your group is headed in the future, even if it's just qualitative? Like, this is a big launch, obviously. Like, what are your priorities over the next 6 months?
Yeah. Honestly, we want to push open finance forward. The goal of Plaid Exchange is to accelerate an API ecosystem. And I feel strongly you do that iteratively. You do that by launching a platform and ensuring that the API solution that's out there can be iterated on, right? So this is not one of the things that I think is really important if you want to accelerate technology is to make sure that it's not an entirely theoretical exercise, that you have a design solution that you are implementing, that you are scaling, and that you are learning from over time. And that is informing the long-term design and scalability of what you're building. And so that's really what we want to do. We want to accelerate an API platform-based ecosystem. And from that, a ton of other things fall. But a lot of the discussion that we're having, if we don't have people on APIs for connectivity, you're not going to sort of learn where the rubber hits the road, right? On some implementation issues, on some of the tools or products that might be most compelling or might make it most scalable or effective for institutions who might be smaller. All of that stuff is that we're really focusing on sort of a tech best practices approach of implementing, iterating, optimizing, and scaling. And that's really what we see our role as. We want to push the industry forward on open finance by making this real.
Niko, thanks for joining us on the Tearsheet podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.